Hey, and welcome to episode 2 of That's Not Okay, where we call out red flags, reclaim our love lives, and talk honestly about the messy, beautiful work of becoming better partners and better people. I'm Alyssa, and on today's episode, we're going to be talking about attachment styles. And this is really important. It's kind of background work for understanding both how you relate to other people in your romantic relationships and how your partner or partners in the past relate to others in their significant relationships or relationships with their significant other. It really can explain a lot of like broken and dysfunctional habits when you enter into relationships. And so just a little bit of background, or maybe just first I'll give you an overview. I do want to mix this podcast both with informative information on why things are the way they are and also practical tools for how you can make changes in your life. And so I think it's crucial to have both. This isn't just information. I want you to be able to make changes to improve your situation, whether you're somebody perpetuating broken habits or somebody experiencing the fallout from a broken habit in a romantic relationship. And so with that framework in mind, this episode is more background information on why things are the way they are, why when we step out into the world and we try to build connections with people, they don't always go as expected or optimally. So attachment theory, which many of us have probably learned about just using the internet, but attachment theory was developed by psychologist John Bowlby and later expanded by Mary Ainsworth to describe how the emotional bonds formed with our early caregivers shape our later relational patterns, especially our romantic ones. So here are the 4 primary attachment styles. The first, and the one that we all want to aim for, is secure attachment. If we are exhibiting traits of secure attachment, that means in childhood, our caregivers were consistent, responsive, and attuned. How that plays out in our adult lives if we are securely attached, it means that we are comfortable with intimacy and independence. We can regulate our own emotions, and conflict doesn't feel threatening because we have the tools to engage in a healthy way, and we know that conflict is not going to sever a tie in the relationship. It's not going to lead to unhealthy consequences. And the patterns that you want to see in somebody, or patterns you want to look for or exhibit if you're seeking a relationship with somebody securely attached, or if you want to be someone securely attached, or know if you are someone securely attached, is that you engage in healthy communication, which doesn't mean that you aren't sometimes angry or upset. It just means that you have healthy means of expressing your emotions. You're aware of your emotions. In fact, you want to see emotional availability in this attachment style, and trust. So going into a relationship, you are open-hearted. You don't yet have a framework for understanding the person that you're engaging with, but you assume that they come to you with equal footing, and trust is only either damaged or lost through conduct. So you don't come into it with distrust for the potential partner. So that's secure attachment, and that's really what you want to look for in a relationship. The second attachment style is anxious attachment, or it's also called preoccupied attachment. So to know if someone's anxiously attached, in childhood, their caregivers were typically inconsistent, sometimes nurturing, sometimes dismissive. To identify an anxiously attached person in adulthood, you'll see that they crave closeness, they want to be close, they want that intimacy, but they fear abandonment. They may feel like too much, too needy, they may too quickly just text you, seeking reassurance, want to be in touch all the time, and they need constant verbal or other reassurances without any basis for that need for reassurance. So there hasn't been a breach of trust. There hasn't been any framework for that other than what they've brought into the relationship. And the patterns you'll see in that attachment style and an anxious attachment style is over-functioning in relationships. They will be the one that always makes the plans. They will get their partner gifts. They will pursue their partner. They'll be people-pleasing. And they will have difficulty trusting that they, in their own merit, deserve their partner's love or have their partner's love. So they always are trying to attain something that they don't feel they have, or maybe they don't feel they deserve. There's just a lack of mutuality. So the third attachment style is the avoidant attachment, or also known as dismissive attachment style. These folks in childhood, their caregivers were emotionally unavailable or rejecting. To recognize someone with an avoidant attachment style, you'll see that they avoid emotional intimacy. Vulnerability feels scary to them and threatening. They value their independence over connection. You might see them feel constrained by the typical, ties of a romantic relationship. Even if they were pursuing it to start, they pull away from those or shy away from those typical constraints. And you'll see that they shut down during conflict. So this might be silent treatment, stonewalling. They won't respond. They might shake their head in frustration, but you will not be receiving interaction, engagement, response. And the pattern that you'll see is that they are emotionally distant, uncomfortable with vulnerability, and they see neediness as weakness. So to be clear, in their minds, any sort of need for or desire for affirmation, desire for emotional intimacy is neediness, and that is weakness. So they don't necessarily even have an accurate perspective on what needy really looks like. So just by way of example, the anxiously attached person who's actually needy from the start would certainly be a turnoff to an avoidantly attached person. They would be probably right to perceive some of those behaviors as overly needy or codependent. But an avoidantly attached person will also see someone securely attached as too needy. In healthy relationships, we still desire emotional intimacy, words of affirmation, signs that we are prioritized, our feelings are important, and our partner loves and cherishes our hearts as much as what we bring to the table in utility. And so, that would be perceived as needy to the avoidantly attached person as well. And that's what makes it a broken attachment style. Finally, disorganized attachment is also known as fearful avoidant. You'll recognize these people or maybe even recognize yourself if in childhood, this often stems from abuse or severe neglect. It means their caregiver was both a source of comfort and fear. In adulthood, these people crave love but fear it. They may push and pull, and they tend toward chaos in relationships. The patterns that you'll see is high conflict, fear of abandonment, and engulfment, and they may repeat those abuse cycles. This one's a really sad one, and it's one that I recognize and relate to in some of my former relationships as well. Recognizing where those patterns come from, where those behaviors were learned, helps me to have empathy for the people that I've experienced and come across, and I hope it does for you too. So, and if you hear in this some behaviors that you've engaged in, be compassionate with yourself. And I hope that if you will be willing to examine your past with an honest eye toward reflection, that you will be able to even have compassion for maybe your caregivers, or maybe things that you've denied. Sometimes people go into denial because it's too painful to believe that the people who were a source of comfort for them in many ways also caused them fear or self-doubt, or maybe made them wonder if they were worthy of love in the first place at times, because maybe for them their love was conditioned based on maintaining a certain level of closeness with the parent. This can be present in enmeshed family dynamics. In fact, enmeshment, which is something that we'll talk about in other podcasts, enmeshment is a form of abuse. And enmeshment is where the child is functioning to as an extension of, and as basically a tool for the benefit of the parent. So rather than the parent seeing themselves as building and feeding into a healthy, independent child, they see the child as an extension of themselves, and they see any conflict as something to be completely avoided. You don't want any rift in the relationship. They see any sort of individuation as a threat or a personal affront to them. And so the child is typically shamed or guilted for trying to pull away. And they will typically rely on the child for their sense of emotional fulfillment, maybe rather than a spouse or in place of a spouse. And so, this is a loaded term, but it's a type of emotional incest. And this might look like triangulation, and like basically maybe one parent will talk with the child about the other parent, and this builds sort of I'm the real person there for my parent, not the other person. It kind of just builds this dysfunctional exclusion of the other parent. I mean, these are just examples, but you'll see this. That's just a less probably obvious form of abuse, but it is a type of abuse. It can be a lot of fulfillment, like the person who's the enmeshed child typically feels very special. They're typically offered a lot of words of affirmation and gratification and reassurance because they're rewarded for being the good child, for being what the parent needs, for meeting their parents' needs, and they feel really extraordinary, and that's really affirming. However, they don't realize that it comes with strings. Well, maybe they do at times, but there's a lot of denial built in. They don't necessarily recognize that there are strings attached. And so any pulling away might be met with stonewalling or shame or guilt or manipulation. And again, this just gets to the point of enmeshment is another type of emotional abuse that can lead to disorganized attachment. So these attachment styles all play a huge role in how we relate to others. And you can see that probably just by looking back at how you have related to others in your relationship. Like, did you go in open-hearted? Were you insecure from the start? Were you distrustful from the beginning, shut down even though you wanted to pursue the relationship? Or did you first want and then for no reason pull away? I mean, this is just absolutely foundational to how we relate in our marriages, our relationships, even just dating. I have some book recommendations for exploring this topic. If you want to learn a little bit more, I'll start with the ones that I've read, and others are just ones I've researched that are good for learning about this. So I've read Attachment by Levine and Heller, and that was a really good foundational background for me, understanding myself and my partner at the time. But you even as you read these things, unless you really know your partner's background, not just the story that they're telling you, but with your own eyes, what you see in their dynamics with their parents, with their extended family, this is best used to understand yourself. But also, if you're seeing behaviors that seem characteristic of these broken attachment styles, it's fair to surmise that there's something going on in their home life that is beyond you. And so these books might be good for you to reference. One is called How We Love by Milan Kay Yerkovich, and it ties directly to howwelove.com. Howwelove.com was recommended to me by a therapist for exploring your broken attachment styles in childhood. So let me talk a little bit about that. If you go to howwelove.com, there are 5 primary broken love styles or broken relationship patterns rooted in attachment wounds. And these overlap with traditional attachment styles, but add a richer lens so that you can get a little more granular about your specific dysfunction that you bring into your relationship. I want to caveat that, I want to caveat that by saying there's also a quiz on this website that talks about secure attachment. I recommend that you take both because one of the quizzes assumes that you have brought dysfunction into your relationship. Everyone brings a little bit of something. Nobody had, a perfect childhood. That doesn't negate that you can be securely attached. So they're not mutually exclusive. You can be both. It's just you need to take both quizzes to understand how your broken attachment styles, how deeply that has affected your ability to securely attach. So with that in mind, here are the 5 love styles that overlap with or that explain our attachment in adult romantic relationships. And all this, again, builds off that book, How We Love by Milan Kay Yerkovich. So the first is the avoider. They obviously have an avoidant attachment. They grew up with little emotional support and learned to minimize their feelings. And they can manifest by appearing calm, but are emotionally disconnected. They struggle to engage deeply with their partner. The second attachment style is the pleaser. So a pleaser is also anxiously attached. They grew up with typically critical, angry, or anxious caregivers. They learned to be good and stay calm and under the radar. And the pleaser fears conflict. They will do anything to avoid rejection, even if it means suppressing their own needs. Then there's the vacillator. They come from a disorganized attachment background. They experienced unpredictable caregiving. They craved connection, but also ended up feeling let down. These people struggle with emotional regulation. They long for love, but can become easily disappointed. The fourth is the controller. They often had a disorganized attachment style or even sometimes an avoidant attachment style. These folks grew up in chaos and fear. They learned to stay in control in their relationships to feel safe. And these folks may be angry, domineering, or emotionally unsafe in relationships. And the fifth style is the victim, at least the fifth disorganized or broken style. The victim comes from a disorganized or fearful attachment as well. They grew up with severe abuse, neglect, or trauma, and they learned to submit, numb, and survive. These folks tend to feel powerless in relationships. They may repeat their trauma bonds. So again, I would go to the website itself. It's called www.howwelove.com and explore who you are. Get introspective and be honest with yourself. You're worth exploring. You're worth learning about. And if you want to look at the other types other than yourself, it can help you to recognize the people that you encounter and build empathy for them as well. And not to be forgotten, I just want to explore the secure connector. This is the neurotype that is the goal. Again, like you take both quizzes, both are available, so you can see how securely you attach in relationships. These folks are open, honest, vulnerable, and able to handle emotional ups and downs. And they can love without fear controlling the relationship. So that would be a great resource. I haven't read the book myself, but I have explored the website. I've taken the quizzes, and I highly recommend. A few others that might be worth looking into are Wired for Love by Stan Tatkin, The Power of Attachment by Diane Poole Heller, Hold Me Tight by Dr. Sue Johnson, which is especially good for couples, and Attached by God by Crispin Mayfield, if you want to explore attachment in the context of faith. So, I also just, before ending this episode, I want to talk about how if you are securely attached, like how being in a relationship with somebody who comes from a more broken attachment style can impact how you respond and how you behave. So if you have had moments like I have where you have just felt so exasperated, so angry, so frustrated by the words that you're hearing, you've been unable to reach your partner, you feel neglected or ignored or not affirmed or unloved not because of your own stuff, but because you are begging for a connection and it is shut down, or you are given words that are not constructive criticism, but more destructive criticism on a habitual basis, I want to talk about how that can impact your typically secure attachment style. So attachment styles exist, or attachment systems exist, because we're wired for connection. Our brains are biologically wired to seek reassurance and connection from our caregiver. In childhood, that's our parents. In adulthood, that's our partner. And so there is nothing wrong with seeking reassurance and connection in your marriage or in your romantic relationship. So I want to just start with that caveat. You are not wrong for having needs. If anyone has tried to make you feel like you, just for asking for a hug or asking for reassurance, asking for love and words of affirmation and contribution in that emotional arena, intimacy, emotional connection, that is not needy. And so I just want to dispel that right away. In itself, that is not wrong, but you're wired for it. It's part of being human. And again, that's the function of our partnership. And I want to say that we are especially wired to seek reassurance and connection in moments of stress, fear, or sadness. And that's true even if your partner is the source of your stress, fear, or sadness. For example, like if your partner has cheated on you, they can be the greatest source of your pain, but they are also the key to your healing if you're going to stay in the relationship. If you are going to try to work it out, that partner should be a safe place for your emotions, your pain to land, and for them to still give you the words of affirmation, the words of reassurance, the words of comfort, the words of apology and reconciliation that your heart needs to restore trust. So again, reiterating, we're wired to seek reassurance and connection all the time, and especially in moments of stress, fear, or sadness. Not in a needy way, not in a please text me every hour of the day way. So if you're doing that, you might be exhibiting an unhealthy attachment style as well. But in reasonable moments of distress, fear, conflict, a healthy attached person does want to reconnect and reconcile. Maybe not right away, but they assure their partner that they want reconciliation and they still love and care for them. And so that's point one. But if you're in a relationship where your valid need for reassurance and connection is consistently not met by your partner, or in childhood, your parent, your friend, etc., like if they fail to respond with care to your needs, then your healthily attached system learns, I'm not safe here. I can't count on them. Maybe I don't matter. And just one caveat on the attachment styles in childhood. Like this is every interaction we have with another human being is a learning moment. So babies are obviously not born one of these four ways. With some influence by neurodiversity, babies learn attachment through how their caregivers treat them. And so the way that you develop these broken attachment styles is through the conduct of your caregiver. So like if you are a baby who's crying and needing love, needing attention, needing food, and your caregiver's not there, or your caregiver punishes you for asking for your needs to be met, that's how you develop these broken attachment styles. Needs are part of the human condition. You should not be shamed for them. And the analogy in adulthood is our primary partner is our new caregiver. And when we reach out for I'm in need, I'm afraid, I'm stressed, I'm scared, and we are met with shame, or we are ignored, or we are punished for expressing our feelings, our needs, then you're going to learn the same thing. Your secure attachment in the context of that relationship may get broken. It doesn't make you permanently damaged. It doesn't make you you're still at core securely attached, but in that relationship, you can start to exhibit some of those broken attachment styles. And that's because insecure connection breeds self-doubt. So if somebody regularly withholds warmth or blames you for needing comfort, you start to question yourself. Like the things that are human, that you always knew were a part of a healthy relationship, now you're wondering, am I too much? Is this my fault? Maybe I shouldn't be asking for these things. Maybe it is needy to have needs. And so you can internalize that shame, and you will, I guarantee, because that's how, relationships and connection work. You will internalize that shame, and it can erode your sense of internal security. So continuing on, secure people can become insecure in unhealthy environments. This is key. Even, as I've said, even someone with a secure attachment style can begin to feel anxious, ashamed, or emotionally unstable when they're in a relationship with someone emotionally avoidant, punishing, or unpredictable. It doesn't mean you're broken. Again, it means your emotional needs weren't met consistently. And emotional neglect is just objectively destabilizing. So if you're in a relationship where you are maybe ignored, or you're not getting that emotional connection or fulfillment or attention that we typically get in a securely attached relationship, that may not look like overt abuse. But being repeatedly denied basic emotional care like comfort, validation, and affection, it can deeply destabilize your identity and trust in others. And that is it's just like a garden. If you plant plants and then you just ignore them and you don't water them, you don't provide fertilizer, you don't pull weeds, they'll just die. So that is the beauty and vibrancy of the work that your caregivers gave you. If you have a secure attachment style, all that work, it'll start to wilt. And so the only solution will be to pull the flowers from that garden and move them somewhere else where they will be watered. And that's a nice way of saying, in some of these relationships, you can't salvage it. Like if you're in a relationship with someone insecurely attached, or in any of those dysfunctional attachment styles, you may have to get out, or your flowers are going to die. You can save them, but you've got to get out. And again, this is not meant to be like a a judgment or a bad, like you are broken and irreparably broken if you have one of these broken attachment styles and came from a different background or a more difficult background. You can change. You just have to first start with self-awareness. If you've engaged in these behaviors, I would start doing a deep dive into who you are and who you want to be. So all of this, we've really talked about attachment styles. I think we've covered all the major bases. I'm not going to say that there's not more to explore, but in broad strokes, we have done the heavy lifting of kind of getting an introduction into this area. And I hope that it helps you understand yourself better. I hope it also helps you to empathize better with the broken people that you encounter. Maybe you can recognize, even in non-romantic contexts, when someone's exhibiting distrustful behaviors without reason, or is shut down, or maybe just overly needy of affirmation where there's no basis for that insecurity. This should be able to help you to identify those things and move forward with empathy and compassion for those the inherent brokenness that's a part of this broken world. So thanks for spending a little time with me today. If anything hit home or challenged you, I just hope you'll sit with it. Growth can be uncomfortable, but you are worth it. And if you found this helpful, please let me know. I would love to talk with you. And just remember, again, until next time, just because something's familiar doesn't make it okay. Thanks.